I woke up to the morning sky first. Baby blues like the rehearsed. When I get up off this ground, I shake a leaf back down to the brown, 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 till I'm clean all gone. And I walk where I'll be shaded by the tree, by the meadow green, for by mile. I'm headed to town, 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 town. With all my favorite colors, yes sir. All my favorite colors, right on. My sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. All my favorite colors. It's a good day, a good day for me, a good day to see my favorite colors. My sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. All my favorite colors. Now take me to the other side, where the baby blues birds fly. In gray clouds, white walls, or blue skies, we gon' fly. Feel alright, feel alright. Now we yeah. They sound like yeah. The least I can say, I anticipate a homecoming parade as we renegade in the morning, babe. Sweet morning, good morning. With all my favorite colors, yes sir. All my favorite colors, my sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. All my favorite colors. Get closer, baby. On the other side, yeah. Oh, a good day for me, a good day to see my baby. My sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. Oh, my baby.
I would say that I was carried in water. I was formed in water. All of us, water is what connects all of us together on this earth. Water is in a continual cycle. There it is. Yeah, man.
Hey everyone, this is Eric Weinmeier. I'm talking to you from Golden, Colorado, my hometown, and I'm very excited to be with you all today. And it's in a really important discussion, talking today about these 10 critically endangered rivers around the United States, and I'm excited to intro and be a part of this discussion. I have a unique relationship with rivers, being a blind kayaker and mountain climber. You probably may not know that, but I am totally blind. So when American Rivers came to me and asked me to be a part of this, I was really excited because this is such an important topic. There are really critical battles going on right now in terms of fighting climate change, in terms of trying to protect these beautiful rivers. I know it won't be easy, but it's very possible, and we can do a lot. My relationship with rivers has been pretty unique because when I was 40 years old, I decided to learn how to be a whitewater kayaker. And I had already done some really fun things in the mountains as a blind climber. I climbed Mount Everest and the 7 summits, the tallest mountain in every continent. But I was really fascinated by rivers. And I remember standing at the banks of the Colorado River, listening to the roar of the rapids. And I had a lot of questions that didn't have answers. You know, how would my guide even guide me down the river when communication is so important and you want to be very precise? Just a foot too far to the left or too far to the right is the difference between getting through the rapid and getting hammered. So lots of questions without answers. And there were days in that thousands of hours of preparation where you're a bit in survival mode. I'm just pinballing down the river as a blind kayaker, bouncing off of the canyon walls, blood splattering everywhere, flipping over, panicking, pulling my skirt, swimming for my life through these rivers, through the river, and getting out of the river that day and sitting on the bank and saying, okay, you got to keep it positive today, Eric. What did you learn? A lot of days I learned why there aren't that many blind kayakers in the world. And I talk a lot about what this no barriers life looks like. And so for me, this no barriers pledge was to kayak the Grand Canyon, 277 miles. Not really to prove that blind people can do this or that, but to break out of these prisons that we find ourselves in and truly live, whatever that means for each of you. For me, it was experiencing these incredible natural wonders of the world like the Grand Canyon. Such an important place. You know, these canyon walls, you don't have to see them. You can actually hear them. They have this beautiful echo, and then you can touch them. They're billions of years old, and the Colorado River being the gauntlet to some of the most incredible ecosystems and kayaking and rapids in the entire world. So I wanted to experience all of that. So after 6 years of training, I left for the Grand Canyon. I had an amazing team. This great team of guides, and we were crushing the rapids one after the next, and that was until day 16, and that's Lava Falls. When I went through lava, man, I was so nervous. You ride this slip down right to the left of this eddy fence, and I hit these boils, these kind of an energy source that comes up from the bottom of the river. Anyway, so I hit that first boil, and I was really nervous, and I think I reacted too slowly, and I flipped over and I was upside down on the top of Lava Falls, cockeyed. I went through in this big cartwheel, and then I was going through the big kahuna waves backwards. I got knocked over immediately. I had thousands of gallons of water crushing down on top of me, so I panicked. I pulled my skirt, and I was swimming blind through Lava Falls. So that was my first experience on the Grand Canyon in lava. But the cool thing is that we camped out at the bottom of lava right below it. And I sat there on the river and I listened to lava above me, trying to understand what the river was telling me. And so I thought maybe it's just, naivete. Maybe the river is in charge, This idea that, when you're scared and you want to shrink and you want to flee and you feel helpless, you take a breath and you lean in to this, maybe I'll call it a light, and you allow that light to blaze into the world. So today you're going to hear about a lot of threats and challenges with our rivers, and some of those challenges are going to sound pretty daunting, pretty overwhelming. But I work with thousands of people with challenges, very significant physical and emotional challenges through my No Barriers organization. And one of the things that we work with is this word, we call it alchemy. It's this idea of turning lead into gold. It's not just surviving challenge or just dealing with it or ignoring it or even overcoming it. It's seizing hold of that storm of adversity that swirls around us, harnessing its energy and using that energy to propel ourselves forward to places we may have never gone to in any other way. I met so many alchemists through that work. One of them is Tim Connors. He's a good friend of mine. He went blind from cancer, and he got down to 90 pounds. He could barely walk. And when he recovered his health, he took part in the No Barriers program. And guess what that program was? Rafting the Grand Canyon. It was a huge, huge endeavor for him. And one night after the first week, he sat on the sand and he was listening to these beautiful birds. And he knew that this was the place that was connecting him back to himself. And the next day, they hiked out of the Grand Canyon. It's almost 5,000 feet. Now, when he went blind from cancer, he couldn't walk up a 30-foot hill. And so he started out and hiked this almost 5,000-foot ascent out of the Grand Canyon. And when he emerged out of the canyon, he told me, he said, "Eric, I feel like I've become a man." So these rivers like the Grand Canyon are critically important to our communities, especially those with challenges, to find yourself, to reclaim your lives and become the best version of yourself. Because these places are so powerful, they are the greatest laboratory for our potential to reclaim our lives and to become the best versions of ourselves. So yes, you're gonna hear about a lot of challenges and they will feel overwhelming. But my greatest hope is that you, each of you, will become the alchemists. You will become these rivers' greatest hope for alchemy.
Hi, I'm Tom Kern, president of American Rivers, standing on the ancestral lands of the Southern Paiute, the Washoe, the Northern Paiute, the Western Shoshone, the Wallapai, and many other tribal nations. Eric is right. Our rivers, the lifeblood of our planet, are seriously threatened. We're here today to sound the alarm for these rivers. There are three significant challenges, crises, that these rivers face. First, the climate crisis. Second, racial injustices. And third, the loss of biodiversity. But while we are sounding an alarm, this is not all doom and gloom. You're going to hear today from frontline partners and staff, leaders, officials, elected decision makers, and they're all working to create just and equitable solutions for our rivers and to create clean water throughout the country. I want to, right up front, thank all of our partners that you will hear from today and thank all of you for joining us. And remember Eric's message about perseverance, about determination against tough challenges and tough problems. So here are America's most endangered rivers for 2022.
10 rivers, 10 solutions, 10 opportunities to make lasting change. These are America's most endangered rivers of 2022. On the Colorado River, climate change and overuse have cast the nation's hardest working river into crisis, putting water supplies for 40 million people at risk. Four dams along the Snake River are driving salmon to extinction and violating treaties with tribal nations. A haven of biodiversity, the Mobile River is threatened by toxic coal ash, putting the health of people, wildlife, and the environment at risk. Antiquated dams on a number of Maine's rivers are killing Atlantic salmon across the state and could wipe them out forever. Millions of tons of industrial poultry waste threatens clean water and public health along Alabama's Coosa River. Increased flooding, pollution, and habitat loss along the Mississippi River are putting people and wildlife across 10 states at risk. Excessive diversions for agriculture leave the lower Kern River in Bakersfield dry and lifeless. Groundwater pumping is drying up stretches of the San Pedro River, which supports one of North America's most biodiverse ecosystems. Along the Los Angeles River, concrete and climate change threaten river health, clean water, and community access. Pollution from one of the country's largest superfund sites is raising health concerns for local communities along Tar Creek. The time to act for healthy rivers, clean water, and future generations is now.
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the Rocky Mountains to the deserts, through scorching heat and freezing cold, from the land of the dinosaurs to fields of food.
I lend my hand to 7 states, 2 countries, 9 national parks,
and 36 million people across an arid West.
I am not the strongest or the largest, but I am the hardest working.
People love me.
My playfulness,
My beauty,
my power,
my life. But I don't think I can offer any more.
I am tired.
I am tired,
tapped,
and tied. Of the hundreds of major rivers in the world, I am one of the few who no longer kisses the sea.
Battles to harness my soul have been won and lost. Use me wisely, and I will sustain you.
Use me like you have, and I will break. My name
is
Red. The Grand River Red. The American Nile.
The Canyon Maker. I am the Colorado River.
And I am the most endangered river in America.
My name's Matt Rice. I'm the Southwest Regional Director with American Rivers, and right now I'm standing on the banks of Lake Mead. Lake Mead is one of the largest reservoirs in the United States. And in the Colorado River Basin, we measure the health of our water supplies based on the water availability in Lake Mead and about 300 miles upstream in Lake Powell. These levels have been dropping precipitously over the last 20 plus years. In fact, 25 years ago, water levels were approximately, I'd say maybe 100 feet higher than where we are right now. Water probably went a mile or so up from where I'm standing. This is really the epicenter of the climate crisis, and the climate crisis is a water crisis.
So we're now in the midst of a 22-year-long drought that started in the year 2000. And we have seen profound impacts on the Colorado River as a result. The nation's two largest reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, have lost about 60% of their contents since the year 2000. And Colorado River flows since 2000 are down about 20% relative to the 20th century average. Scientists have a new term for this. It's called aridification. I know that's a mouthful, but the aridification in the American Southwest is defined by earlier runoff, in some cases 2 to 6 weeks earlier in the spring, smaller snowpacks, shorter winters, more rain and less snow, higher temperatures, these drying soils, fires, and it's being driven in part by a warm and thirsty atmosphere that wants to hold more moisture, wants to suck up more moisture, and thus dry out the surface of the earth. Mega drought is possibly a component of this, so these dry periods could last decades with small periods where we might come out and it might wet for a little bit, but then we'll be right back in this long-term aridification.
If we're going to meet this challenge, we have to be inclusive. We need the 29 federally recognized tribes in this basin to be a part of the decision-making process, which they have not been up to this point. We need more and more people to come into this movement to save the Colorado River, because all of our lives, our livelihood, our quality of life in the Southwest depends on it. And it's beyond just the Southwest. If this river crashes, this is a crisis not only in the region, but it's a crisis nationwide, and I'd even argue globally.
I'm an enrolled member of the Hickory Apache Nation. I'm also the nation's water administrator and have been so for the last 12 years. We continue to try to operate on hydrology that was experienced 100 years ago. And we're at a point in time where that's not possible anymore. The river is at a point of collapse. And absolutely, if we don't do something different as human beings in terms of how we're going to deal with the future of this sacred river, then it will collapse. And then there will be those, the fighting for who has what. And it doesn't have to be that way.
That's what we're faced with right now. There is light, though. We have solutions. We just need to be able to act with urgency. We have to work together. We have to collaborate. We have to get this done. And right now is the time.
So 40 million Americans in every major southwestern city depend on the Colorado River. Many of these cities are completely outside the basin. So the Front Range of Colorado, 50% of its water comes from the Colorado River. Or in Arizona, Phoenix is 50% dependent, and Tucson actually has no surface water. While technically in the basin, that water gets pumped 336 miles uphill and 3,000 vertical feet. Salt Lake City gets Colorado River water. Las Vegas is 90% dependent on Colorado River. Los Angeles and San Diego, it's about a quarter of their supply. So it's hard to overstate the importance of this river.
Hello, my name is Maite Arce. I'm president and CEO of Hispanic Access Foundation. For me, the Colorado River is like my community, the Latino community. It's very hardworking and it contributes critical value to our nation. For me, the Colorado River has had a way of whispering, "Am I not extraordinary?" It makes me realize that I'm witnessing something beautiful and bigger than myself. The Colorado River sustains life, community, and economies, but it's been exploited by humanity and impacted by climate change. In urban cities that rely on its water, most people probably understand that they consume water every day, but are they aware and active in the role to conserve it? 2/3 of the entire Hispanic population live along the basin. In rural communities like Yuma, Arizona, one of the most important agricultural valleys in the West, the Colorado River supplies water required to support jobs, and Hispanics are an essential part of the workforce in this region. They do understand that the river is under threat due to over-allocation. they are extremely concerned about their livelihoods and the threat to their communities. Hispanics must be a critical ally in rethinking about water usage and conservation, as well as in shaping and advocating for smart policies that protect the river. And while policy is essential to the solution, it's also urgent to provide consistent education and engagement of local stakeholders in the cause. All consumers of the river's water must be part of the solution. Not only is public support critical to the adoption rates of new policies and initiatives, but it also serves to instill these perspectives as part of a communal way of thinking, which will transform behavior today and tomorrow.
So a number of scientists have actually decided to not call this a drought anymore because it's actually something different. Drought is an event that's temporary, and we think that this is not temporary. In fact, it's our future. What we're seeing here is anything but normal. Normal implies predictability, and unfortunately, we don't have predictability. Climate change has change in it for a reason. Things are changing and will continue to change. If you're going to call this anything, call it the new abnormal, but don't trivialize it by calling it the new normal, because it's going to change underneath us and likely get much, much worse.
The value of water, as I've been taught, and as I've adopted, in terms of my understanding of it, is that it's a sacred element. And by a sacred element, it's one of those that gives life and provides life. And so when you're thinking about, what I've been taught about water is that if it provides life and has the ability to take life away, we hold it in reverence. It gives us what we need to survive on this planet. And therefore, we give it the level of importance of life and death. And if you were to have an element like that, how would you respect that? How would you honor it? How would you help it in terms of its natural flows? How would you, help to honor its sacredness in terms of how it's treated? So all tribes are asking for is a seat at the table so that they can speak for their own water rights. I think the exclusion of traditional knowledge lies in the same vein of the exclusion of tribes in the policymaking process. And in terms of how is it that we can add value to the current processes when the current structures don't allow that in any shape or form. And there's others, besides Indigenous folk who share those same values about the river.
We must engage diverse voices to maximize the success of any water policies. Hispanics and other communities must be included in the beginning of this work and walk with you along the way. Ultimately, the future of the river, Western states, and the Hispanic community are all tied together. Recent successes have shown a path forward: negotiation, collaboration, education, conservation. We need to coordinate better. It's time to boldly move forward on all fronts. The Colorado River is entrusted to us, a vital source for all of us, but we must take care of it in return.
What I would say to state and federal water policy makers is wake up. We all know the perilous situation that we're in right now. And in order for us to move forward, we can't build on the past. The past got us to where we're at.
We're going to have to make decisions about how to deal with a declining supply, the likes of which no one in the 20th century ever anticipated. Within the water management community and within the American Southwest, though, to solve this problem, we need national and federal leadership to solve the climate change problem. We have almost all the technology we need. We have all of the policy tools. What we need is the will to do it. And unfortunately, we lack that right now, but I have some faith in our system that we can put it together, albeit we're going to need to apply some serious pressure to decision makers to get working, because time's short here. We are running out of time to solve this problem.
And do I have hope for the future? Absolutely. because I think that's inherent, in terms of who I am as an Indigenous person in my DNA. And again, based on thousands and thousands of years of existence here. And what does that teach us? We can't adapt to it like we used to. So we need to adapt in new ways. We have an opportunity to create a new paradigm of policy making, of inclusive voices, where we jointly create a future together. What an opportunity for that to happen.
So Matt, great to be with you here on the banks of Lake Mead. You were talking just a minute ago about being here at ground zero of the climate and water crisis. We've got the bathtub ring here at Lake Mead showing the decline of water. So talk to me about what we need to do to address this challenge. This is the most endangered river of 2022. What are some of the solutions for moving forward?
Yeah, so we absolutely are at ground zero of the climate and water crisis in the southwestern United States. The good thing is that we just recently passed a once-in-a-generation infrastructure bill that's going to bring $8.3 billion to the western United States, a lot of that in the Colorado River Basin. And in that bill, there is a lot of funding for a new approach to building resilience, to protecting our rivers, protecting our watersheds. And it's going to require all of us working together to do things a little bit differently, to focus a lot of our energy and our money and our partnership on things like nature-based solutions that build resilience. We restore our headwaters. It provides water quality and water. Those types of projects are cost effective. They provide water quality and water quantity benefits. Yep. They're cheap. We can do it at scale. But bottom line is that we have to come together. We have to work together. The conservation organizations like American Rivers, ranchers and farmers, the cities, the tribal nations. We have to work together to make sure that we can live with the river that we have. Yep. That we put the money into the ground where we need to, so we can continue to have a thriving future.
Well, thank you, Matt. On your screen, there is a link for you to take action, to add your voice so that we can address this crisis and start moving this region to a positive, healthy future. Thank you.
Hello, I am Representative Melanie Stansbury, and I am proud to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, right in the heart of my hometown in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank everyone from American Rivers for asking me to be a part of this important announcement today about the Colorado River and to talk about our most precious resource, which is water and our rivers. Water is life, water is sacred, and water is essential to everything we do. Just a few weeks ago, we learned that our rivers and communities across the West have been gripped by the worst drought of 1,200 years. Our communities across the West, especially in New Mexico, are no strangers to water scarcity, and that, of course, is why we call it the arid West. But it is clear that what we are seeing today is part of a much larger trend of a changing climate, rising temperatures, lowered snowpack, and fundamental changes in our hydrologic systems. Climate change is here and the science is clear. It's threatening the ability of our communities to bring water to our fields, to meet the needs of our tribes and our pueblos, our farmers and our ranchers, and of course, our life-sustaining rivers that depend on water to live and survive and thrive and support our communities. It comes as no surprise that the Colorado River has been named the most endangered river in America, and I welcome the call to action that this report generates to address our river's biggest challenges. And I will say, on a personal note, I was born in the Colorado River Basin on the San Juan River in Farmington, New Mexico, and so this is something very near and dear to my heart. I've dedicated my career to working at the nexus of science, social justice, and sustainability, and I'm proud to say I am a declared water nerd. But you don't need to be an expert to see that the Colorado River and the communities that follow along its banks rely on this water and are facing many challenges because of the impacts of climate change, changes in ecological systems, the ways in which water is managed, and of course, the ways in which water is needed across our communities. Communities in New Mexico rely on the waters of the Colorado River for drinking water, to irrigate our fields, to sustain our economies and our ways of life, and because water is sacred. For this reason, in spite of the challenges facing the Colorado River, we have also seen the emergence of historic partnerships to manage water resources in new and collaborative and innovative ways. These partnerships are crucial, but also along the Rio Grande Basin that flows through the heart of our district, and which depends on those water transfers from the Colorado River to meet the needs and environmental uses within our communities. The future of managing both the Colorado and the Rio Grande will require collaborative partnerships, investing in the best monitoring science, data, and technology we can build, modernizing our infrastructure and our operational requirements and systems, and ensuring that all communities, especially our tribes and pueblos and our Hispanic acequia communities, are at the table in helping to make decisions about how water is shared, moved, and used. Water access is not just a New Mexico issue or a Colorado issue or even a Western issue. It's a national and a global issue, and it is our job as lawmakers to address environmental injustices and ensure the future equitability of water access and use by creating and passing transformational water policies, working with our tribes and pueblos to uphold our trust and treaty responsibilities, investing in and adequately funding various water management agencies, developing the best water data science and technology we can, investing in resilient infrastructure and technical assistance for our communities, and finally, of course, protecting and restoring our rivers. That is our charge as caretakers of these sacred rivers. And I want to thank American Rivers for everything that you do, and every supporter and partner for standing up for the rivers that are so vital to our future.
Hello, my name is Shannon Wheeler. I serve as the Vice Chairman for the Nez Perce Tribe and have for the past year. I would like to just thank everybody for being here today and having this time to interact with one another, to come together for this very important reason of salmon and clean water, and is exactly what we're currently fighting for to save, and in the face of the climate crisis and in the face of the salmon crisis, that it is times like this that we need to come together to be able to share with one another, to understand one another, and also to move forward with one another in unity to help the cause of those crises that are even further reaching than what we know. And we sit here today thinking about what we can do, what we should do, and what we will do. And that is the attitude that we need to have in order to save the salmon and to get our waters more clean once again and pristine like they once were. As we as Nez Perce people have enjoyed for thousands of years that interaction with the water and including the salmon, many of the things that we fight for and believe in that make us who we are very important to that cause. And it's really hard to explain without actually seeing. So we're adding some pictures of some of the things that we're talking about, of what makes us who we are and how we tie this to our cultures and our beliefs, and how we can hope that you can help visualize. We hope these pictures will help you visualize of what makes us who we are and what makes that unique and what makes the survival of salmon unique because of our creation story that ties us to the salmon and this obligation that we have from our ancient covenant as salmon give himself to us and the rest of the animals gave themselves to us for our survival. And it's that overarching obligation that we have to all of the creatures of this land, that why we stand up and why we speak for them today. And we hope that those that are able to make the changes will make the changes, and those that are advocating for those changes remain united in our efforts moving forward to ensure that not only these species that are threatened, not only this globe that is threatened, but our people have hope into the future for their own survival, for your children, for our children, for the children of this planet, and those generations yet to come who we fight for. Thank you.
My name is Ben Rains. It is my pleasure today to introduce you to the Mobile River system. This is easily the most biologically diverse river system in North America, but it also exists under constant threat of complete destruction, thanks to the Alabama Power coal ash pond that sits on its edge. So we're going to talk a little about the incredible richness of this system and the incredible stupidity of leaving its fate to chance. The Mobile River is the terminus for the Mobile River system, which drains almost all of Alabama. 77,000 miles of rivers all funnel down into the Mobile River and into Mobile Bay. Because of this river system, Alabama is home to more aquatic species than any other state. In fact, because of this river system, the Mobile River, Alabama is home to more than twice as many species per square mile as any other state. This place, though little known, is staggeringly beautiful. In the public mind, Alabama is steel mills, cotton fields, and civil rights protests. But those are just things we've done to Alabama or in Alabama. Alabama itself is a whole different world. One of the things you'll notice if you visit the Mobile River is the incredible diversity of habitats, even within a few miles of each other as you move up the river. Snaky bayous dotted with palmettos, Spanish moss hanging in the trees. More than 280 bird species use the Mobile River and this river system to survive. The plant species are just as diverse. Everywhere you look in this river system, you'll see something spectacular, something that you would see almost nowhere else on Earth. And that's the beauty of this system. But the heavy imprint of industry is beginning to show. Alabama has the weakest environmental rules in the nation. Instead of requiring companies to clean up their outfalls before they hit the river, Alabama allows the companies in the state to use the Mobile River as a sewage treatment plant, giving them a mixing zone for pollutants in the river, effectively turning our river into an industrial sewage treatment center. The insect populations in the Delta are stunning. E.O. Wilson talked about the Mobile River system as the most diverse system in North America, and said he suspected that scientists would continue finding new species every trip out into its wilds. He said the Mobile River and its system are as unexplored as the wilds of Borneo. Because of the Mobile River system, Alabama is home to more than twice as many species per square mile as any other state. The contest really isn't even close. Thanks to the Mobile River system, Alabama leads the nation in the number of species of fish, turtles, snails, mussels. crayfish, the list goes on and on. Literally leads the nation. 450 species of fish in the Mobile River system. That's 1/3 of all fish species known in the United States. When we look at the turtle species, Alabama is even more singular. The Mobile River system and its delta, the Mobile-Tensaw Delta, have more species of turtles than any other river system on the planet. Think about that. More turtle species than any other river system on the planet. And every one of them is under threat from this coal ash pond. The coal ash sits on the edge of the delta, right where it bottlenecks down for the run to Mobile Bay. It's gigantic. 21 million tons of coal ash sitting right on the edge of the nation's most diverse wetland complex. Alabama Power's own calculations suggest that if the dam were to fail, the ash would spread all the way across the delta in a smothering layer, killing everything in its path. Killing everything in its path in the nation's most diverse river system. We all saw what happened in Kingston, Tennessee when the dam there failed. The Emory River was destroyed. Can you imagine how much higher the stakes are when we're talking about destroying everything in the most diverse river system in the United States? The threat of collapse for the dam is most intense each winter when Alabama's rivers can rise up to 50 feet above their summertime levels, often for months at a time. Every year, floodwaters swirl within a few feet of the top of this dam. In 2016, after the winter flood, aerial photos showed that several areas of the dam had to be shored up due to damage from the floodwaters. This was a harrowing brush with disaster, but it's made no difference in Alabama, where we're still going ahead with this plan to leave the coal ash in place. It doesn't have to be this way. Alabama Power should follow its own example. The same company is voluntarily digging up all the coal ash in Georgia. Why on earth is that not good enough for Alabama? Why would we let the nation's most diverse river system be at threat forever just because Alabama Power won't clean up its mess? Even as companies in North and South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, all are removing ash from the edge of these rivers. Alabama deserves better. The nation deserves better.
This is Maine. Wild Atlantic salmon are gone from most of their native range across New England, and only the scant memory of their existence remains. Today, they return to only a handful of rivers in the United States. These are Maine's Atlantic salmon rivers. These are the same rivers where log drives moved the lumber that built the northeastern United States. But for many years, Brookfield Renewable Partners, a massive multinational corporation with tens of billions of dollars in energy projects across the globe, has been violating the Endangered Species Act by delaying, harming, and killing endangered Atlantic salmon migrating on the Kennebec and Penobscot rivers. On the Union River, salmon and many other native sea-run fish species are delayed, excluded, and killed while the dam's operations cause major water quality impairments. Restoring these rivers to let them run free is essential to saving Atlantic salmon. Dam removal will also recharge our commercial marine fisheries and working waterfronts and bring phenomenal ecological and economic rebirth to the Gulf of Maine. Rejuvenated fish runs in these rivers will also help fulfill long-ignored sustenance fishing and treaty promises made to the Indigenous people of Maine, the original caretakers who live on and continue to care for these rivers. We know from past experience that river restoration is enormously successful for the environment, the economy, and the local communities. To prevent the total extinction of Atlantic salmon from the United States, significant action is urgently needed at dams on the Kennebec, Penobscot, and Union rivers. Brookfield is fighting the changes needed to save Atlantic salmon and restore Maine's salmon rivers. The state of Maine and the federal agencies cannot back down and need to continue to use the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Federal Power Act to protect and restore Atlantic salmon and their rivers. Maine is the last stronghold of wild Atlantic salmon in our country, and it is up to us right now to save them.
We were looked at traditionally, we were a poor community of color, actually very politically vulnerable. And our city and state wanted to build a huge waste facility on our waterfront. And here we were, a waterfront community, yet the way that we were perceived was as this place that both wealthier and usually whiter communities could afford to avoid. Like, this is where you placed all the things that they were trying to not deal with. But for us, the river itself was this almost like shining, beautiful thing that basically we were separated from. But we realized that if we could use that as an opportunity to show people in our community and folks from outside of it that there was something valuable right there, this beautiful natural resource, then we could actually start to consider the art and the act of reclaiming our community in ways that actually resonated with us and that had an opportunity to support the environmental goals of the city and, of course, for us as well. Although there is a long history of the environmental and sustainability and conservation movements actually not working, in real collaborative ways with, low-income, communities of color in particular, where a lot of threatened rivers are. There's also great examples, of that. And I think looking at those type of examples and for the value that they bring, not just to the rivers themselves, but the communities through which they run, actually benefits everybody and actually builds, I think, a much more stable and secure, conservation and environmental movement in our country, where it values, because it shows that it values everyone's input and involvement, in the betterment of our environment. Look, we've all walked into, systems that existed long before us, from systemic racism and classism and all the isms that absolutely do get in the way of us actually building significant avenues for us to work together. And the only way that we're going to continue to do that is just by being open and honest and continuing to work. Not having, an expectation of how people could and should be acting, but just being really clear, that there are, issues and systems that were put in place long before, and that, we need to give each other some grace as we go forward, but recognizing that folks that were in those communities, like mine in the South Bronx, where it was, things were done to us, they not with us for the most part. And unfortunately, the environmental movement in general, has a history of when they do try to work in communities, like ours, it's not with us or not with the intention of really supporting us. So just knowing that and just like recognizing that that is how things happen, but then just being able to go like, we can do things differently now. Like, well, yeah, you know that phrase, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Second best time, today. Do it today and tomorrow and the day after that.
My name is Jesse Demumbrian Chapman. I am the Executive Director and Upper Coosa River Keeper here in Rome, Georgia at the Coosa River Basin Initiative.
My name is Justin Overton, and I am the Executive Director and Staff River Keeper at Coosa River Keeper, located in Mount Laurel, Alabama.
We are here to talk today about the beautiful Coosa River, which forms in northwest Georgia when the Etowah and Oostenaula rivers combine in downtown Rome. The Coosa River then flows west into Alabama and makes a 280-mile journey to the Gulf of Mexico. This river created an economic and cultural pathway before the highway system existed and helped create many of the cities and towns located up and down the Coosa River. Over the last century, many dams and reservoirs were formed on the Coosa, causing one of the largest extinction events in the modern era. Despite this impact, the Coosa River Basin remains one of the most biologically diverse river systems in all of North America.
The Coosa River has two major issues. First, we have large number of industrial poultry operations that are discharging their waste into our municipal sewer systems, causing major sanitary sewer overflows, as well as the chicken litter and other waste is spread thinly across our fields. Both of these things are compromising water quality to the point that our state agencies have put pollution budgets or total maximum daily loads on many of the reservoirs on the Coosa River for nutrient pollution as well as oxygen enrichment. What we're seeing now is permits and regulations are not being enforced by the state agencies who put this pollution budget on the Coosa River. On Neely Henry Lake in Gadsden, Alabama, sanitary sewer overflows are rampant, specifically in low-income and African-American communities, which are bearing the burden of this pollution due to crumbling infrastructure of the sewer system in the area. Plus, this further compromises water quality of an impaired waterway with a pollution budget. However, the permits, regulation, and enforcement from our state agencies in Alabama often focus on protecting the industry rather than the people who use our river for food, for fun, as well as for drinking water. We need EPA Region 4 to get involved to ensure that these pollution budgets are being monitored to protect public health and water quality for everyone in Alabama and in Georgia.
While the Coosa River is greatly impacted by this industry, we are by no means the only river in the southeast region that has nutrient pollution. EPA Region 4 needs to step up and become a clearinghouse of data so that we can have a holistic picture of where chicken litter is generated and how it's spread. With more information, we can make better informed decisions on how to reduce nutrient pollution, the pathogens that it carries, and harmful algal blooms in our rivers and waterways.
We dare to defend this river and hope that you'll stand with us to encourage EPA Region 4 to defend the Coosa River from further impairment and harm.
Hello everyone, my name is Mark River Peoples and I am the head guide at Quapaw Canoe Company and I'm part of the MRN. So today I'm here with my fishing poles and I'm going to fish a little bit today before I have to go back to work. But I'm also out here to talk about how important it is to preserve these estuaries and these wetlands.
The Mississippi River plays a vital role in all our lives. It is woven into our culture, showing up in America's literature, poetry, and music. It is the center of a $500 billion per year natural resource and recreation-based economy that employs 1.5 million workers. The Mississippi River is also a source of drinking water for over 18 million people. The river provides habitat for almost 800 species of animals, including migratory fish like the pallid sturgeon and American eel. The Mississippi River is a highway, and not just for people. Over 350 species of birds migrate along the Mississippi River annually. From Lake Itasca to the Gulf of Mexico, the health of the Mississippi River is at risk. Once a vibrant and dynamic big river that twisted and wound across its floodplain, feeding some of the most productive and biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, the Mississippi River is now in a straitjacket, tamed, constrained, and polluted to support economic development. But that development has come at a great cost as habitat on the Mississippi River continues to degrade and more Mississippi River species get added to the threatened and endangered species list. Now, climate change is exacerbating these threats and causing more flooding that threatens the communities that live and rely on the Mississippi River.
With climate change and the fluctuation of the river, these backwater and wetlands and floodplains and estuaries are so important to the health of the river.
Waters like the Great Lakes, Puget Sound, Chesapeake Bay, and the Everglades all have geographic program offices within the EPA that transcend state boundaries and set restoration priorities. It is long past time we give the Mississippi River the attention it needs to support all the life that depends on it, which is why we are calling on Congress to pass the Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Act to establish a program office within the EPA for the Mississippi River.
This work to restore the Mississippi River, to build resilience in the Mississippi River, is a 10-state collaborative. And it is going to be with an anchor of the federal government, giving local input and at times totally local autonomy as to how communities and states and groups of people want to see us build resilience and vibrancy into the river for future generations.
The Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Initiative, or MIRI, would be a voluntary, non-regulatory, additive program to the existing patchwork of ecosystem rehabilitation programs that are currently working on the river. It would give EPA power to set priorities and fund projects through grants that restore natural infrastructure, reduce flood risk, combat aquatic invasive species, and improve water quality. And the MIRI Act sets aside 35% of all funds to invest in the communities that need it most, including communities of persistent poverty and communities of color.
The focus in this legislation is to making sure that no community gets left behind. We're going to make sure that every community is embraced, every community feels welcomed, and everyone has a chance to do their part to make this river the great river it deserves to be.
And actually, it's really good for the community because this is where everyone comes to fish, and a lot of people live off the river here in Clarksdale, Mississippi.
The Mississippi River has given America so much. It's time for us to give back to the Mississippi River. Restore the Mississippi River. Love the Mississippi River. Protect the Mississippi River. Save the Mississippi River. Pass the Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Initiative.
But I want to be able to make sure that this river is resilient enough to stand all the pressures that human beings will continue to put on it, all the pressures climate change is going to be able to put on it, so continue to be a vibrant working river, as well as a place where families can come to refresh and recharge their batteries. We need nature, and nature is here on this river, and we have to protect it.
Love the river. Go ahead and pass the Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Act.
Hi everyone. Thank you to American Rivers for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this important announcement about the Mississippi River. I understand how critically important the Mississippi is, not just for Illinois, but for our entire country. For the 10 states and communities lucky enough to have this river as part of their lives, we must work together to create comprehensive solutions to restore it. That means removing obsolete dams, preventing damaging levees from reshaping its floodplains, and adding more solutions to ease the flooding issues burdening communities along its banks. We should also recognize that many of the flooding issues on the Mississippi River disproportionately affect communities of color. So supporting our rivers means advocating for justice. Policies and unequal implementation of the law resulted in polluted rivers flowing through communities of color, while more affluent white communities enjoy cleaner, safer rivers. As a founding member of the Senate's Environmental Justice Caucus, I've made it my goal to work for environmental equity, not just in Illinois, but across the country. I was also proud to help pass the bipartisan infrastructure law to provide significant support to EPA to help improve water infrastructure, clean up Superfund sites, and help address legacy pollution that affects our lands and rivers. I'm also proud that leaders at all levels of government, from President Biden and EPA Administrator Regan to local leaders in the Metro East in Illinois, continue to be united in supporting solutions to help the Mississippi. We must recognize the critical importance of addressing environmental and public health challenges for all Americans to make sure we don't leave low-income Americans and communities of color behind. I'm committed to a clean, healthy Mississippi River, supporting thriving communities, and I pledge to keep working for just, equitable river solutions. Thank you for speaking up and taking action.
The Kern River is a majestic body of water found in a very unexpected place.
I feel it's integral to our identity as residents of Kern County.
This is the primary river that created the city and the living areas of Bakersfield.
You can't really introduce anyone to the Kern River in town because it's not there. It's just a dried strip of dirt. There is still water that's coming out of the Kern Canyon, but what's happening is that water is being diverted prematurely before the river runs its course. So that means that those people who have rights to that water are peeling that water off before the water can finish its journey down its channel.
Where there is no water in the river, there is no vegetation. Everything that is green is now brown. Nothing grows.
It's a real hardship for our community to have that river artificially starved of water when it should be flowing.
Some common misconceptions about not having water in the river would be that it's mainly due to the drought that we're experiencing here in California. And the main reason why we don't have water is due to water management and a lack of prioritization to the health of the river and its surrounding ecosystem.
They took full control with no consideration of the river, and it remains in that same condition today. And we must come back to the table to consider, give the rights back to the river.
The state should prioritize the Kern River, like as they have other rivers, and there's been progress elsewhere, and I would hope to see the same happen here.
Agriculture can continue to thrive and be a booming industry in our town and in our community, and there can be water in the river. It will require cooperation, it will require collaboration, it will require some creativity and a will to do it, but it is entirely possible for every farmer and water rights holder to have their water and to have the water run through the river.
Kern River represents life, and I just want to feel more connected to it by not having to go to it, but have it come to us, as it should, and its natural flow.
It is the source of our life. It is the source of our economy.
The river is just something that everybody should experience, not just be like limited to only a certain amount of people going up the canyon or going very East Bakersfield.
We need to approach this much more cooperatively. We need to approach it much more creatively, and we need to really think more about what is the responsible way to run the water system that we have right now.
Hello, this is Dolores Huerta. The threats that are facing our rivers today are more daunting than ever. In several years, we have all witnessed climate change, bringing about some of the worst flooding and the worst droughts in our history. We continue to ask more of our rivers in a time when they are more fragile than ever. Communities and ecosystems that depend on our country's most endangered rivers are facing serious threats that must be addressed head-on before it's too late. This year's Most Endangered Rivers list from American Rivers is especially close to my heart. I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley with the Sacramento River and the San Joaquin River. And this was such an important part of my childhood and my growing up. And then when I came to Kern County and I saw our own Kern River here and saw that it is in a really dire situation. Every year, my family's tradition has been to host a reunion on the banks of the Kern River, where we recommend and we reconnect with each other and enjoy the tranquility of this beautiful waterway. Every year, we host this gathering upstream of the city of Bakersfield because in our city, the Kern River ceases to exist. The abundance of water that the mountains provide us via the river is consistently diverted east of the city, leaving no water in the natural river channel to sustain wildlife for the nearly 500,000 people living in Bakersfield to enjoy. The impacts of a dry Kern River are felt disproportionately by the most disadvantaged in our community, who often they don't have the luxury of escaping the summer heat in a backyard swimming pool. These low-income communities bear the cost of the river being dry, while relatively few people profit from the use of the Kern River water. The Kern, just like the other rivers on this year's list, needs our help. You know, one lesson I learned in building the Dolores Huerta Foundation, community organizing, and in the United Farm Workers is that we are the ones that really have the strength when we come together that we can really change the policies that will make sure that we protect the Kern River. Because what I have learned is that if we don't do it, it won't happen. We can't depend on others to come and do the work for us. So it is our time right now with ours and yours advocacy, persistence, and engagement that we can change the outcomes of these rivers. We, together, can help protect these rivers, the communities, and the wildlife dependent on them for generations to come. We can restore the Kern River in Bakersfield. We can restore the salmon on the Snake River. We can better manage the Colorado River so that millions who rely on it can continue to do so for another generation. You would be surprised how powerful everyday people can be when we work together. As we have seen in the past when we work for farm worker justice, we can all do it together. Si se puede, we can save our rivers. Thank you.
The San Pedro River is the only undammed river surviving in the Southwest. Its life-giving flows support an astonishing variety and abundance of species. Each year, millions of migratory songbirds follow the river and its lush corridor of cottonwoods and willows.
There's a very high diversity of bird life here. Places like this are critical to the life cycle of these birds, whether they stop and breed here or they stop and refuel and continue their journey northward.
The river also provides critical habitat for threatened species, such as the western yellow-billed cuckoo and southwestern willow flycatcher. And the river supports an even broader community. It's one of the most cherished birdwatching locations in the United States.
Birding and birding tourism is a multi-million-dollar industry here in Cochise County. People come from all over the world to see the birds that are here. And there have been studies done that have shown the economic importance.
It's a place to splash in the water, to feel the river running over your toes on a hot day. It's a place to find peace in the shade of towering cottonwoods. It's a place to listen to the rhythm of the water, where eventually all things merge into one and a river runs through it.
And the San Pedro has one of the highest diversities of mammals of anywhere in the U.S. It's a pretty amazing place.
But the river's life-giving flows are steadily declining, if not disappearing underground. Like much of the arid West, human water demands continue to increase along the San Pedro River, as a prolonged mega drought results in reduced water supplies for both people and nature. Without your help, the river will run dry.
What's really at stake on the long term is sustainable water supply, not only for our wildlife resources, fish, wildlife, plants, for people. So if we continue to pump groundwater without any consideration of the withdrawal rate, we eventually will be in a place where there's no water for us either.
The San Pedro River has long inspired passionate defenders. We ask you to join in and save this incredible river. Among the many threats facing the river, two stand out. First, groundwater pumping poses a massive threat to the longevity and health of the river. This trend must be halted and reversed.
I could teach a class of second graders that groundwater and surface water are connected, but our Arizona law does not recognize that. And it's just a fundamental part of hydrology is that you can't just keep sucking water out of the ground without impacting everything, and yet we act like we can.
The first step is standing up for the river and preventing any additional groundwater pumping. The second threat is the rollback of critical Clean Water Act protections for the river and its tributaries. An expansive network of streams supply the San Pedro with huge volumes of water from the mountains during storm events. They are essential to the functioning of the river in this arid region. We must ensure these waters remain protected under the Clean Water Act, or else they will be filled and destroyed. Without standing up now for this incredibly important river, there won't be a river left to save.
My hope for the San Pedro River is that we are able to maintain this healthy riparian corridor for its entire length, from its headwaters in Mexico to where it meets the Gila River to the north.
Los Angeles is famous for its beaches, but its other major body of water is perhaps the region's best kept secret. 1 million people live within walking distance of the river, and yet chances are most of these folks don't even know they live in an area that was once a floodplain. The L.A. River sustained this city for generations, dating back to when indigenous tribes lived in harmony with its natural cycles of drought and flood. But rather than providing easy access to nature and resilience against climate change, today's river is a highly polluted flood channel lined with concrete from its headwaters to the sea. We can weave the river back into the fabric of life throughout Los Angeles. In fact, we have already seen this in stretches like the Glendale Narrows, where nature has adapted to survive in this fragile urban ecosystem. But getting it done more broadly will take political will from city, county, state, and federal leaders. Bringing back the river to health will also improve public health. The LA River could connect us to each other through trails, parks, bike paths, and bridges. It could also bring nature back into urban areas, increasing green spaces that produce clean air, cooling shade, and groundwater recharge. A healthy river is also critical for wildlife ranging from endangered steelhead trout to the majestic California mountain lion. Now is the time for bold vision and even bolder action. Join Friends of the Los Angeles River and LA Waterkeepers as they call on Los Angeles County and other local, state, and federal officials to chart a new course for the LA River and move us steadily towards a healthier river and resilient communities. and I'm proud to announce that the L.A. River will receive $28 million under the new federal infrastructure law and $1.6 million under community project funding to restore hundreds of acres of habitat. The Friends of the L.A. River have been a crucial partner in this process, and together we will continue to chart a course for the L.A. River that revitalizes our local ecosystems and allows all Angelinos to enjoy our city's natural beauty.
This is Tar Creek. It's one of the most polluted creeks in the country. It's been abandoned and we want it better. I'm Rebecca Jim. I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation and I'm the Tar Creek keeper. For 42 years, acid mine water's been pouring down this creek, over 1 million gallons a day. It flows down the 11-mile course of Tar Creek and enters the Neosho River, which then flows into the Grand Lake of the Cherokees, a drinking water reservoir for hundreds and hundreds of people. I drink that water. Tar Creek flows into the water I drink, and it matters to so many people to have clean water. EPA picks out a concern. Their concern for our site at Tar Creek is lead. And in this creek running by us now are multiple metals. EPA is focusing only on lead, and they're doing that because it affects children and it changes their lives forever. It doesn't take much lead to harm and to steal a child's IQ. So any child that gets near it and gets that mud on their feet and tracks it in their house can end up being poisoned by the dust that they brought in their very own selves. Lead can change IQ and it can make learning difficult. It can have lifelong effects on every organ of the body. In Tar Creek, not only lead, but also cadmium, arsenic, manganese, and other metals of concern. People are ill because of the exposures they've had at this site. This creek carries those metals. Tar Creek is not only a creek, but also the name of one of the largest Superfund sites in the country. This site affects all of the members of the Quapaw Nation, and we flow down and affect the Miami, the Peoria, and the Ottawa tribal lands. It flows on and affects the rest of the tribes that are designated for Ottawa County and end up hitting the Cherokee Nation. This creek affects not only the drinking water source it flows into, but where it expands and floods the community, it floods the town of Miami, Oklahoma. And when it does, lays out these polluted soils across playgrounds and front yards and backyards and gardens. It affects every plant that grows here. It is absorbed by every single tree and species that grow along this creek. There's not a creek in our state that's as damaged as this one. As a waterkeeper, we really want water that can be drinkable, swimmable, and fishable, and this water isn't. Tar Creek deserves to be clean, and that's what we want.
So you've heard a lot of great information about how to protect our rivers, but I can tell you that we're not going to do it alone. It doesn't matter how talented each of us are. Blind guys don't climb Everest alone either, and they don't kayak the Grand Canyon alone. They do it with a great team. One thing I've learned in the mountains is actually that when you're on a glacier, you're physically roped together with the people around you. You're actually linked to them physically. It's so powerful. You win together, you lose together. I think these rope teams is such an important metaphor for community. And that's what we are. We're this community of advocacy, of protection, all organized by American Rivers. And we're moving together. We're growing day by day. We're making decisions. We're being proactive. And we know we're on one river, on one team, and we're standing on each other's shoulders. So let's do this together. I welcome you to join the American Rivers Rope Team, to be a part of the solution, take action. And I want to also thank all the partners who have made this possible, who are working every day, the local leaders around the country who are protecting these 10 rivers. And I want to thank all the experts and folks out there listening and being a part of today's discussion. Be a part of that rope team. Thank you so much, and definitely learn more about American Rivers by going to americanrivers.org/endangered rivers. Thanks, everyone.
I woke up to the morning sky first. Baby blue is like the rehearsed. When I get up off this ground, I shake a leaf back down to the brown, 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 till I'm clean all wrong. And I walk where I'll be shaded by the tree, by the meadow green, for by mile. I'm headed to town, 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 town. With all my favorite colors, yes sir. All my favorite colors, like on my sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. All my favorite colors. It's a good day for me, a good day to see my favorite colors. My sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. All my favorite colors. Now take me to the other side, where the baby blues birds fly. In gray clouds, the white walls, or blue skies, we gon' fly. Feel alright, feel alright. Now we yeah. They sound like yeah. The least I can say, I anticipate a homecoming parade as we renegade in the morning, babe. Sweet morning, good morning. With all my favorite colors, yes sir. All my favorite colors, my sisters and my brothers, see them like no other. All my favorite colors. Get closer, baby. On the other side, yeah. Oh, a good day for me, a good day